Excuse me? Who's flying your plane? Or do you have to buy another one every time you travel to and from that island? I'm a defender of the merits of this arc, and even I find that asinine. Ask you say what you want. Ask you say what you want. Ask you say what you want. The fire. Everybody hates the Doma arc. Everyone hates the Doma arc. And damn it, most of it is not its fault. This is where the dub dialogue changes hit critical mass with the entire series, both between 4Kids' changes to this arc and the lost context from all the preceding ones ultimately coming to a disastrous head. As none of the story points worked any longer since a lot of what went on hinged on character actions that had been excluded from or rewritten in the dub, meaning nothing made sense anymore. It thus lost people in droves, as it undermined the serious story about consequences the entire arc was trying to tell, turning the show into pretty much a parody of itself as a result. Hell, when the abridged series finally started working on this arc, they kept nagging about how utterly stupid it was, as nothing it seemed to present was in any way justified narratively, and they weren't wrong. And yet, again, that was all coming from just 4Kids' bastardization. Oh, don't get me wrong, the Doma arc has its fair share of problems that makes it overall a pretty disappointing arc. It overused anime cards, there are a bunch of animation errors, intermediate actions make little sense, there is obnoxious comic relief coming from Ryuzaki, Haga, and... why the hell is Otogi here? And for that matter, why don't we see Bakura at all in this arc? The series pretty much forgets he exists for a year, when he needs Yugioh and the gods for his big game plan. Have them journeying off into a situation that could get them all killed or lost for good, I think might interrupt his plot. And the story was far too stretched out for as little happened during it, to the point it could have been far better as a 26-episode half-season. To not even get into how it eventually collapses under pretentiousness that hurts the earlier, better parts of it. But anything good about the early stuff was drained out by the alterations made to it. People to this day still defend 4Kids' dubs out of nostalgia for their childhoods, but even their rationales falter in the face of this one. Because, well, screenwriter Shin Yoshida's intention with it was to culminate character arcs in the face of a series whose manga source material was coming to a close, and did not address many of them in that conclusion, as is usually a merit to that guy's work, which is then stupidly demonized in this fandom as they don't understand what he actually was responsible for, as opposed to other factors which screwed such over. Case in point, people blaming solely him, and him alone, for how awful Yugioh Vrains has become, when Shoji Yonemura happens to be among that show's writing staff. I think I've commented enough on Shoji Yonemura's career failings when I've reviewed the Tyson films, that I don't need to elaborate on that further. Doma instead was meant to close the character arcs of the ones who weren't given the chance, but the root problem that came from it in the dub comes back to, what character arc? As I said in the initial rant on Duelist Kingdom, 4Kids removes any type of character growth from the shows they imported, keeping the characters stagnant and refusing to let them develop. But because of that, no one among the dub viewers could see the characters commit the actions they do in this arc. They weren't the ones the audience had seen thus far, but that's all because of the extreme divergences that came from the show requiring them be in a place 4Kids never let them reach. And for those reading the fan translation of the manga, because the manga in America had not even reached Battle City yet in its release, or watching the fan subs originally, the viewers of the show in 2004 were blissfully unaware of this divergence. Thus, all the condemnations came down solely on this arc and the beginning demonization of its writer in the West, instead of what was changed about it. And if you think I'm being pretentious about this again after the Blade reviews, thinking, oh, it's not as big a deal as you're making it out to be, everyone does it, every translation makes changes and it's supposed to make changes. What they did couldn't possibly have been extreme enough to cause that. Well, yeah, no. Here's a clip from a Japanese dubbed episode of Rick and Morty.
これはミーシークスボックスだ。使い方だがボタンを押す。私はミスターミーシークス見て見て。リクエストを出す。ミスターミーシークス、マヨネーズの瓶を開けてくれ。了解です。するとリクエストに答えてくれる。
I watched an entire season of Check, and yeah, it's pretty much one for one. I checked the French dub of a few shows, then a Spanish dub, then a German dub, and then a Chinese dub of various series I like with the subtitles intact, and compared them to the things they get up on broadcast television, and then services like Funimation Now, Netflix, Amazon's Anime Strike, Verve, and Crunchyroll. And we are the only ones with a serious fucking problem about bastardization, mistranslation, or egregiously altered localizations which misinform a given series events. Everyone else suffers this far less from things being lost in creative liberal translation, whereas here it has somehow remained a mainstay. And it shouldn't be if anyone is bothering to do their job correctly.
With that all said, let's finally get started on the Doma arc.
In the aftermath of the Battle City tournament, Ryuzaki and Haga troll around Domino, both with intent of claiming the God cards. Ryuzaki legitly and Haga through stealing it, only to get their soul stolen, and monsters to then burst into reality all over the world. This interrupts Atem's plans to simply visit the slab and regain his memories to vanish from their lives beyond death, as the actions elsewhere prevent the ritual from coming to pass. And shafting progression of the established story arc for a side story that initially doesn't seem that big a deal. I mean, monsters in reality? Bah! We've been seeing it all series. Via holograms. As there ends up not being a good way to distinguish the real ones from the solid vision versions. This emergence phenomenon makes everyone think Kybercorp is behind the chaos, only for Seto to reveal he shut down every single thing in his company down, and the monsters were still around. An important plot point absent from the dub. The God cards are stolen, stupidly, from Zugoroku cleaning them instead of them staying with Yugi at all times, when someone could have snuck in and stolen them. And they actually point out the plot hole of them being summoned without a connection to the ancients, but then possessed by the power of Orichalcos and wielded by this one-off guy named Gorimo. Yes, he actually has a name in the Japanese version. And with him comes the infamous spell card, the Seal of Orichalcos, and its use in this series could not be more different. Instead of a tool of evil used as a means of conquest, it is instead stated to be a tool of the light and absolute justice, judging those taken into its field, and manifesting the concept of might makes right into a reality with consequences, the loser being either less righteous or less convicted in their resolve, those that lose this thus determined as sinful in the face of it. It's essentially a twist on the original intent of Shadow games, whose purpose was more to force play and punish cheating, but if you did everything correctly and properly, you had nothing to fear from them. But as they were a means by which to let malicious people show their true face, truly corrupt people would expose that in the game's darkness and be consumed by it. When the game started to be about Millennium item wielders, it was then a game between equals, the game inflicting stamina cost and mental fatigue, which pushed the users to their limits, and with a penalty for loss chosen by the winner. And this is all flipping that so it's always the same punishment, the theft of one's soul. And while 4Kids constantly used and abused that consequence, beyond Pegasus' use of a monster spirit sealing during his arc, that was not something commonly seen or used by the Millennium items, nor was coming to this series. Thus an entire antagonist faction being capable of doing that from using a simple card and a stone pendant has a more tangible threat here than the Western take on the series, as is the consequence from its use. Every soul taken from the effect of the seals was a counting clock to doomsday, the revival of the Orichalcos god they all serve that once empowered sufficiently can come through a gate between worlds and destroy this one, which is far more menacing an end goal than Pegasus, who just used this power to get his victims out of the way and as hostages for reviving his wife. Orichalcos' card effects are far better explained here too. It is a tool specifically used for increasing one's battle strength, both by increasing monsters' attack points and allowing monster spaces to be expanded beyond the then standard 5 and into your spell and trap card zone, and the spell card itself could not be destroyed by card effects. When the seal was finally released as a real card, it was only nerfed slightly from this, still retaining the attack boost and an echo of the back row system by making it so weaker monsters couldn't be attacked until stronger ones were destroyed, but made it so you couldn't summon from the extra deck and blew up any special summon monsters you had on the field when the card was activated. Really, it only had use in Monarch and Malefic decks, and with Sin Stardust Dragon on the field, led to a mutual protection effect being put into play back then when that deck type was playable. I think it actually is playable again since Skill Drain is no longer banned. I should look into rebuilding that. For winning the duel against Greymouth, however, the group are only left with more questions than answers. the Orichalco stone he wore taken into Ten's possession, and the D-less duelists recovering and being drawn into the antics of the adventurers in their own quest to gain the god cards, which we'll discuss later. As we have the return of an annoyance, Rebecca, finally out of her innocent little girl disguise thanks to thinking Yugi her boyfriend. Though as is the true fact of anything involving her, we just hate her on principle. But Professor Hopkins is around now as well, due to him discovering the ruins of what set this all off. It seems the origins of duel monsters in the Shadow Games in fact predated ancient Egypt's sealing and utilization of monsters 3,000 years before modern times, and in fact dates back at least 10,000 years. And in fact even farther than that to the beginning of their universe. Thank you Yugioh and the Numeron Dragon revelation. Actually, this pissed off Western fans of the series right off, as they didn't see this as a lore expansion, but a retcon. But the fact was, this detail isn't ever contradicted in the manga, as the purpose behind all this is, in fact, to bring a greater scope of a threat and the related consequences in the series which, beforehand, were solely personal. And this serves as the basis behind which all the other Yu-Gi-Oh! Series would follow from. Dual spirits, the Crimson Dragon Earthbound Immortals and Mech Lords, the influence of cosmic power in the numbers, the dimension-splitting powers of the Dimension Dragons, and even the cyberspace-manipulating powers of the Link Monsters, all originate from this one revelation that the magics and mysteries of the monsters that are tied to these card games goes back a lot longer, and are far deeper than just what comes from 7 Egyptian artifacts and 2 sealed souls, but a far grander manipulation of the reality of the universe. This shown when, after our antagonists for the arc, Dartz, sacrificed the Egyptian gods to their god, that Yugi and Tam are drawn through the power of the puzzle into the dual monster's spirit realm where the god has manifest, bonding with the spirit of one of the realm's 3 great dragonic knights.
There
are some who call me Tim.
And as all the dual monsters brought to Earth are devoured as additional offerings, that dragon's power is unleashed. There's some really impressive animation in this arc too. Well, yeah, it has some notoriety for cheap and off-model animation. That's more towards the tail end of the arc. Right now, DMG has to thank Atem and Yugi for taking up this task, for this Dark God's power has more merged onto this realm, backing up their forces thanks to slivers of its power that have been unleashed in the forms of small crystals. The same as their antagonists, stones. Moreover, this whole opening bit actually more explains what the hell is going on from that interaction. In the dub, they never explain why Yugi, Seto, and Joy are called to get these dragons, or where the Great Leviathan came from, but here it's crystal clear. The Leviathan god isn't some world-devouring power from afar, it's just another dual monster spirit that originates from that realm of spirits. It's no different from Zork, and Zork hadn't even been introduced yet. But with monsters seemingly from his game out attacking, it's no surprise that Pegasus comes back into play. As remember, in the anime continuity, as one of the few divergences for the manga, he's not dead. Have I mentioned how much smarter everyone is here than in the dub? He ultimately does this to ask for his help, arranging them to be brought to America. Yuzaki and Haga attacking along, however, they never reach him, as Dartz has more than his 3 horsemen as minions. Seto's got his own problems. With his experience with hostile takeovers, he initially thinks this is all a plot to smear the company and get their stock value to drop so someone else can buy it all up while it's devalued and cheap. And sure enough, that's exactly what's happening. Dartz's minion Amelda has it out for Seto, and wants to destroy him and all his aspirations, in a disturbing echo to how Seto himself destroyed Gozaburo, disguising himself initially as Pegasus to trick him into coming out of his self-imposed duelist retirement.
Pegasus.
No, you haven't. Remember, he keeps cheating. But why Amelda disguises himself as Pegasus to intimidate Seto into faltering against him has an important context to it. It's forcing a confrontation of his past failures and everything Seto wants to move past, and the sins seen part of them. Amelda is a disciple of Dartz because his home was destroyed and family lost in a war Kaiba Corporation supplied arms to both sides of to escalate and extend the conflict in the sole name of profits. He escaped death solely by chance and was left to watch his brother burn. Everyone he knew, he lost because of their technology and weapons, including what Seto developed that Gozaburo took from him for his own machinations. And as the head of Kaiba Corporation, a Kaiba Corp that has endeavored to bury that history and forget it ever happened, Amelda holds him responsible for all the deaths and atrocities committed. In the name of profits, Amelda has been taking to undermine, take over, and ultimately destroy. And from this new context to what the Silver Calculus is said to be, it can be seen as judgment delivered by a victim to the originating source of sin, his source of rage, his source of conviction, in the pursuits to hold them accountable for their actions. And I love the way this scene sets up questions about responsibility and redemption. Amelda accuses Kaiba of responsibility for his brother's death. Mokuba immediately protests, and yet Seto stops him, giving Amelda the space to continue, realizing what he means. Amelda takes full advantage of Kaiba's silence, scathingly telling him that the redemption he sought in remaking the company is impossible because every act Mokuba cites, everything Seto has or will do, is built on blood money, lost lives, the suffering of innocence, and none of it will ever make up for that past. In a few brief sentences, Amelda gets straight to the heart of Seto's own doubts that this series has exposed, and the anime original content has massively expanded upon. The ones that have haunted him for years, and the ones he sought closure for, that Atem denied him months before. There are a lot of things Seto could say in response. That he was a child left with only bad options, that he had no control over Gozaburo's actions. Instead, Seto states that he has never denied his responsibility, that he accepts that he inherited Kaiba Corporation's sins with his takeover of the company. He acknowledges that Amelda's experiences and hates are valid. There's never been any doubt that Seto feels a deep responsibility for Kaiba Corporation's role in killing people, or an equally deep guilt for his part, even inadvertently, in designing weapons. He's keen to take the Kaiba name, and he is willing to live up to what he sees as the obligation that go along with that choice. But I also think that Seto would rather take the blame for things he had no control over, than admit that he was helpless and powerless to prevent them. The duel starts with two opposing beliefs. Amelda's certainty that redemption is impossible versus Mokuba's equally opposite belief that everything his brother has done moving forward is redeeming both himself and his corporation. There's a real sense that Seto doesn't know which truth will ultimately be his. That as much as he wants to believe in Mokuba's perspective, he's afraid that Amelda's is the true one. And Amelda's is the one that ties Aiden more deeply with his own beliefs and philosophy. So Kaiba does what he always does. He presses forward and puts everything on the line emotionally in his duel with Amelda. He is dueling to prove his own worth. And yet the duel ends in a tie. Because whether redemption is possible isn't a simple yes or no question. It's a question that Kaiba himself doesn't know the answer to. This duel cuts to the heart of Kaiba's own doubts and conflicts, and while those are still unresolved in himself, how could the duel end in anything but a tie brought forth from Seto accepting the power of Critias? The motivations for the antagonists in this arc, despite how poorly they might have been wrapped up, when you actually decide to look into them, are actually pretty damn nuanced, despite each of them only facing their opposing number at most twice, and their interactions being surprisingly limited. And the grand majority of that was gutted in the dub, with their choice to censor the crap out of these guys into just a, this is good, this is bad, black and white box of conflict, when every single aspect of this was supposed to be painted in gray. As the reason accepted Critias' call is, he's not done. This won't be the end of him endeavoring to make up for the sins he bears, regardless of their origin of being inherited or committed by his own hands.
オカルトめいた現れ方に不満はあるが、このカードの力は紛れもない現実。ならばそれでいい。
As the group arrives at Industrial Illusions, they are confronted by Mai, who has also fallen in with Dartz' minions and is after Jinochi himself. Now for many, this is what broke the arc for them. Mai, after everything that happened with Merrick, would go out and attack her friends? That's unbelievable! Well, not as much as you might think. Here's the thing. What the penalty game Mai suffered under did to her is impose upon her unending isolation, tortured her with visions of everything she'd wanted but shied away from just at her fingertips, but unable to ever claim. The friends she'd found ignoring her plight, when in reality that wasn't so. But something the original series never addresses is the fallout to that exact thing, as that experience exists beyond lingering pain. Merrick endeavored to destroy her mind and soul. You think that leaves no lingering effects? No lingering loneliness? No lingering fragility any manipulative bastard can't come across and take advantage of? Like we just saw with Amelda that Dartz does to anyone and anyone at their lowest point? No, the trigger may seem shallow, being forgotten in the face of grace despite being the world's strongest female duelist, but the cause behind it, the memory of that penalty game making her actually believe she deserves to be forgotten, is not. This entire arc for her is resultant from the trauma of what Merrick did to her. So when Dartz, through proxy of his minion Valon, comes to her and makes her think that she can find validity, vindication, and the strength she feels she's lost through joining him, it's a natural, nuanced development to her character. Born of a man that is a master manipulator, and ultimately a cultist, finding someone damaged, and playing off of all their fears and insecurities, and thus rebuilding them as a twisted shell of themselves, by making them believe that this is the way to get what they truly want. Frankly, everyone that gets conscripted into the Society of Light next series have less legitimate reasons for them joining that cult beyond, the magic brainwashing, than Mai does for being turned into an antagonist. And it's natural for her to want to face down the man who she now thinks to have made her believe in nothing but lies this entire time, that was now doing nothing but to manipulate her, that all of what he said were deceptions to use her, and never actually cared about her like her new master and would we go so far as to say boyfriend? Valon now seems to, even as she seems to scorn intimacy and connection more than she ever did before, as a relentless Valkyrie seeking vengeance. If anything, what happened to Mai is nothing but a tragedy, mirroring and complementing what happened to her before. As the manga, she's never seen again after Battle City. She was just there to lose, was disposable and always beaten, and this is the consequence of that. How superfluously her character was used, of everything she suffered, and the heights she fell from. Again, to cite GX's Society of Light arc, they echoed this later with Kaiser Rio. Not in the same way, certainly, but that same humiliation and loss of sight of oneself, eventually leading them down a path which embraced ruthlessness and dismissed the bonds held before.
あんたにはわかんないでしょうね。まっすぐ前に進むことしか知らない。あんたにはね。
So Jinochi's goal of this arc is to prove once again that everything he's ever said, everything he's ever done with and towards her, weren't the lies she now thinks them as. To make up for shying away from unequivocally proving that to her during Battle City, and make her see the truth of herself that's become blind to her own eyes beyond a veil of self-contempt. The will to seek that goal, awakening the last of the dragons, Hermos, for his use in the trials against her, to bring her back to her true self. And not all three of the legend dragons are in the story, I can actually comment on them, and I love them. Really, I absolutely love them. They were cards I wanted to be real like a lot of fans, and frankly, much of the legacy sets of the last 5 years has immensely improved the rewatchability of this arc. Part of why the Doma arc didn't really work originally is few of the monsters and cards utilized in this arc actually existed. So unlike the Virtual World arc, it didn't even really try to act as an advertisement for the real card game that made all the duels obnoxious. It was pretty much just Rafael's Guardians deck, the further advancement of Mai's Harpies, and, ironically, a few of Ryuzaki's cards. Everything else not seen previously was anime-only cards, and strategies revolving around Orichalcos. So there wasn't even a buffering factor of people getting ideas from the strategies seen utilized like the prior Battle City arc showcased to play in the real card game. Hell, it took until this arc was almost a decade old for them to start bothering to create and release cards exclusive to it, the majority of the later made ones being done 15 years after debut, and ironically often with more powerful effects than they were shown having before, simply so they could be considered usable with regards to the game's ongoing power creep. With almost everything from this arc out now though, there's more appeal to it as everything but Amelda's and Valon's decks could legitimately be played if you so chose. Granted, the Guardian's deck was crap outside of Butterfly Dagger Elma, which got permabanned due to it being part of a broken strategy involving it, Fear Free the Night, and anything that used spell counters, but at least the reason for that is clear. But thus, what I've been showcasing is exactly what killed it in the West. This entire arc is reliant and built on character, an attempt to fix the pre-existing flaws seen in the series that the filler arcs were directly addressing and playing off of to further expand the story, lore, and build its conflict off of. But because 4Kids gutted, remote, and destroyed all of that in their awful dubbing policies, all of that is lost. And that is exactly why this story arc is considered irredeemable and outright stupid among dub-only viewers. Because the 4K version of it legitimately is. Still, with Valon interrupting the duel, and thus pissing off Mai due to her thinking she shouldn't need to be saved anymore, the rest of the group are allowed up to Pegasus' Sanctum, where we are, halfway into this story arc, told the dangers of Doma, an underground organization existing back millennia that have manipulated events throughout history. Illuminati confirmed! And have only recently gained the power needed for their plans through, what else, the Duel Monsters card game, and in having prepared a counterplan to their actions with help from inspiration of the Duel Monsters spirit world related to the legendary dragons that have chosen 3 as their heralds. With the meeting with Pegasus done, the group meet up with Rebecca and Professor Hawkins to get their next lead, only to find Hopkins has been kidnapped by Rafael. Or at least he pretends to. Hawkins actually released before the duel that attempts pulled into. As the series explains, Rafael is the former American champion before Rebecca, and has a crazy strong bond with his cards due to them being his soul tied to sanity when he was marooned on an island for years after a cruise liner's crash claimed his parents and siblings' lives. The context that it was his family that died, of course, lost in the dub. After ending up on the island, he began to see the spirits of the duel monsters, being the first character to possess that power later seen of Judai Yuki and Ruka, and that bond was what solely kept him sane. All he could say after escaping the island was Zug Zug, but then he had to go back because it was apparently a metaphor for limbo, as is Raphael's entire character arc. Dartz apparently saved him when he tried to escape to sea, allowing him to return home, but with him as the sole survivor of his family, he was besieged by greedy, duplicitous, distant family members, and the worst dregs of humanity trying to take advantage of a naive child, with again his card's spirits as his only companions. And with everything that happened to him, Raphael is one that believes in the inevitability of fate, that escaping fate is pointless, and death is the inevitable fate of everyone and thing, which is a fate Atem himself has escaped. Thus he believes it is his duty to free his spirit from its self-imposed prison of the Millennium Puzzle in the name of Doma and Dartz, who was later revealed to have rescued him, but he believes he can do that without the seal of Orichalcos. Now, this is one of the biggest things contend about this arc, Raphael's whole "the Pharaoh is evil" stick, which brings up questions about his sins because he doesn't actually know. That went absolutely nowhere. And it went nowhere because it wasn't part of the series at all. The seal of Orichalcos doesn't turn people evil. It just sets up a very specific type of shadow game. Thus, every single freaking thing Raphael says in the dub, everything that's complete and utter idiocy that even kids could see through as bullcrap, is actually complete bullcrap. It was never there to begin with.
So what you're saying is that morality isn't cut and dry. Even the best people have a darker half to their personalities, and nobody is really perfect. No, I'm saying that having the ability to be evil makes you evil. So I guess this season was written by someone straight out of kindergarten then.
The irony of that being, a bridge to Tem's lines about darkness and light and balance, yeah, that's actually what Doma was saying has happened to their members. confronting their inner darkness and impulses to become a more complete, balanced person.
お前たちの絆が心の光ならば、我らドーマの絆は心の闇を信じることだ。その絶望の底にあるものなのさ。お前たちのような独善的な正義を振りかざす連中には決して覗けないような深い底に、おそらく中途半端なら残るのは虚しさだけだろう。だが虚しさすら残らないとしたらどうだ。
And the entire reason for that vast oversimplification's existence was for one singular purpose: to cover up Atem's inexcusable character flaw, to excuse him legitimately fucking up, and to dismiss the character arc that results from it, by saying the Orichalcos turned him evil, when it does nothing of the sort. As Rafael, with all this, gives Atem the seal of Orichalcos, as Rafael refuses to use it. He can beat Atem without it, and it's Atem's own pride and relentless need to win is what ultimately destroys him when he instead decides to make use of it, when he could have taken the loss with no penalty or cost. Atem encourages others to ruthlessly claim their victories, as to do anything else is an insult to their ego and pride, even though the opposing person needs it more than them or can learn from their opponent losing, just as Yugi did with Rebecca early back in the show, and that having prevented so many problems that had been acknowledged, needs it for something they cannot do themselves, needs it as a means of catharsis, to save a loved one, to find a completeness of self. It doesn't matter the reason. It would be against his own pride to do anything else but win, and thus he never does, at times pulling crap out of his ass to excuse it all away with how he was supposed to win, as it's his right. Because he is the righteous one. And this all throws that in his face as the empty-handed self-righteousness that I have continuously called out, as using the steel devastates his own strategies and turns them against him, because he could have either won without it or lost with zero consequences to anything currently going on, thrown it away after getting it, and yet wanted to make an example out of Rafael, all out of pride. And just as it did before against Seto and Duelist Kingdom, just as it did again in Battle City, that pride was more important than what it would give to another person he was challenging, or what it would cost him. He only fought for himself, and thus ignored the person whose bodies he used, and the consequences of that act. He loses, just in the way Rafael planned and endeavored to do. But it is Yugi who pays for the cost of his own arrogance, the idealism and philosophy he's never challenged, or how he has hurt others through it. The evil that takes over Atem is nothing but the darkness he refuses to acknowledge, that exists in his own heart and has clouded and pervaded his actions. And as one who spent millennia bathed in the shadow magics of the Millennium Puzzle, he drowns in it, forcing an innocent soul to pay the price of his own sins. Why Yugi does this is itself reflective of his character arc that I've addressed before as well. Throughout the series, Yugi has let Atem have more and more control, constantly choosing to shy away from his own life and let Atem live it for him instead. He feels he can't do the things Atem can, and would be the better man if he just did it himself. And this explains why he spent the next sect of this arc suffering from a heroic blue screen. He, not some evil that overtook him, is responsible completely, totally, and utterly for what happened. No corrupting influence made him play the card which resulted in all of this. He alone was responsible, and he has to come to terms with the guilt of that action and its consequences.